Alright, hey, today we are talking about the planets. So we'll be going over the planets and some fun facts about each one, starting closest to the sun and working out in our solar system. Make sure that you open up your focus questions and you're writing down some of these facts for each planet. When we look at our solar system, we really see two different types of planets out there. There's either going to be planets that are made out of rocks, or there's planets that are made out of mainly gas. These two different types of planets have different names. We call the rocky planets terrestrial, and terrestrial really means Earth-like. We call the ones made from gas Jovian, and that really kind of means Jupiter-like. Jupiter's made out of gas. And so listing our terrestrial planets would be Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Jovian, on the other hand, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And when we start looking at our planets, we're starting with Mercury, closest to the sun. And if I didn't tell you we are looking at the planets, when you see some of these pictures of Mercury, you might think it looks very similar to the moon. And that's just because Mercury and the moon, neither of them have an atmosphere. So that means they get impacted by meteors and they have these craters. Earth gets hit by a lot of meteors too. But because of our atmosphere, a lot of those rocks burn up before they hit the surface, so they never produce a crater. And if one of those meteors does produce a crater, we can't really see it for a very long period of time because with our atmosphere, we also have a lot of erosion. And that erosion just completely removes the marks, the impact craters that are produced. Mercury, on the other hand, with no atmosphere, isn't protected from these impacts. And once the impacts form, they're there pretty much forever until another impact changes it. Second planet from the sun is Venus, and Venus is sometimes called Earth's twin. It's about the same size. A couple of cool things about Venus is, first of all, it's the only planet that spins backwards. So that means sunrise would then be in the west and the sunset would be in the east, the complete opposite of what we have here on Earth and all of the other planets. And probably the most important fact about Venus is dealing with its atmosphere. Unlike Mercury, Venus has an extremely thick atmosphere, many times thicker than Earth's atmosphere. And it's pretty much made out of one element, carbon dioxide. And you probably know a thing or two about carbon dioxide, and you know how it impacts the temperature of Earth. And CO2 on Earth, it's just a fraction of a percent. And that fraction of a percent is tied to global warming. So when we have a planet that the entire atmosphere is made out of carbon dioxide, that planet is going to be extremely warm because of the greenhouse effect associated with carbon dioxide. We'll be skipping over Earth because we spent all of Earth Science A studying Earth, so we don't need to talk about it now. So we're moving next to Mars. Mars is the last terrestrial planet and it's about a third the size of Earth. Some really cool stuff about Mars is, first of all, its color. That kind of rust-like color, that reddish color, it's called the red planet because of this oxidation that takes place. Another really interesting thing is that it's the home of the largest volcano in our entire solar system. It's called Olympus Mons, and it's no longer active. There's no active volcanism on Mars anymore, but there once was, which gives us clues that it used to have molten layers in it, just like Earth. Those molten layers more than likely produce a magnetic field that protected Mars from the solar wind, this radiation, this force that comes off of the sun. And when it had a magnetic field and was protected from the solar wind from the sun, people think there was water on the surface of Mars. But what happened to it? It all starts with the solidifying of the interior of Mars. As soon as Mars started to solidify, it's a third the size of Earth, so it cooled off much quicker. The inside solidified, no more magnetic field means no more protection from the solar wind. So the solar wind traveling out in our solar system from the sun made contact with the atmosphere, and as it moved around the planet and traveled further into the solar system, it siphoned and pulled all of these molecules off of Mars's surface. And eventually it pulled nearly the entire atmosphere off of the surface of Mars. Our first Jovian planet is Jupiter, and Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. One really identifiable feature of Jupiter are those color bands, and those color bands are something you're familiar with. It's just convection currents, so it's rising atmosphere and sinking atmosphere within the atmosphere of Jupiter. Another really identifiable feature of Jupiter is the Great Red Spot. It is more or less a hurricane, an atmospheric storm that has been continuous through nearly the entire observation of Jupiter. It's always had this red spot. And it's just an atmospheric storm, the hurricane type thing, high winds. Surprising fun fact, Jupiter actually has a faint ring. You may not have known that. The next planet is my favorite, besides Earth, but Saturn is my favorite planet. Saturn is another Jovian planet. It's one of our gas giants, and this is the one with the really, really well-developed ring system. And this planet's my favorite because it's the one that I actually first saw with my very own eyes. And yeah, you can look up in the sky and you can kind of point at these bright dots that, are planets. But Saturn was the first one I actually looked through a telescope, and the light that reflected off the surface of Saturn beamed into my very own eye. And that was a life-changing experience. If we move out even further, we have Uranus, and these last two planets are both blue in color. And it's really important to know why they're blue. The blue color comes from the gas methane, so make sure to write that down. Methane causes these planets to look blue. Really cool thing about Uranus is that over the course of its history, it must have been impacted by some large object, because the axis of Uranus, instead of being more or less up and down like the rest of our planets, is actually on its side. So this planet almost looks like it's rolling through its orbit, almost like a basketball rolling on the ground, and instead of a basketball spinning like up on your finger. And our last Jovian planet is the furthest one from the sun, which is Neptune. Neptune is also blue in color because of methane. And Neptune also has an atmospheric storm. It's called the Great Dark Spot. And this dark spot, being a very dark blue, is very similar to Jupiter's Great Red Spot, where it's just, a storm, a hurricane in the atmosphere of Neptune. And that's going to wrap it up for our planets. And don't even ask about Pluto, because Pluto's totally not a planet, for bunches of reasons. All right, you probably want to know why. First of all, Pluto is not even a unique object out that far anymore. It may have been one of the first objects that we noticed out that far from Earth, but it's not the only one anymore. It's not a unique object. There's many other similar sized objects out by Pluto. It also doesn't fit into our system of terrestrial and Jovian planets. So being that far from the sun, it should be a Jovian planet, should be mainly made out of gas, and it's not. So it doesn't fit in. And the most convincing argument to me is that the shape of its orbit is so much different than the shape of the other planets. If you think about the orbit of the other planets moving around the sun, they're the same exact shape, just larger, moving them further from the sun. But when you get to Pluto, the shape is actually different, where it crisscrosses, it changes with Neptune. It is actually closer to the sun than Neptune for 20 years at a time during its orbit. So all of these things together got Pluto downgraded from a planet to a dwarf planet. It was a really big deal in astronomy for a while. Big fights. But that's going to wrap it up. So if you have any questions, please make sure you're always asking questions when they come up. And make sure you go back and watch the video again if you didn't write down those important facts that we talked about for each planet. Those are going to be on the quiz. All right? Have a good day. See ya.